Greetings, podcast world, and welcome to the Beers with Engineers podcast, where we have a pint of fun and a shot of geek. My name is Bert Ushold. This is episode number 28, whose title is Not Team Building, Building a Team. My guest today is Tim Coonahan, who is Director of Engineering at Medica Corporation, a company that makes blood analyzers. Besides being a good friend, a good engineer, and pretty funny, Tim holds a unique position in my life. To coin a phrase, I call him my 9/11 guy. In other words, we were together when we learned about the terrorist attacks back in 2001. If you had read much about memory retention, even for major events such as 9/11, it is not very reliable. So part of today's episode is a live science experiment where we compare what we recall about that day. Today we'll see how much Tim's memories have gone awry, because I know mine certainly have not changed. Anyways, before that, a reminder to go to my website, dexterityeng.com, to learn more about me and how I can help you develop your product. I would love to help you bring your product to market, and I think you would benefit from having my help. That said, let's get on with the interview. Good afternoon, Tim. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
It is wonderful. It is another beautiful fall day in Massachusetts, and I've said that so often on this podcast that I think my credibility is waning. But honestly, it's absolutely gorgeous. You can confirm that, right? Because you were also in central Massachusetts with me. Beautiful weather.
No. I am in Denver, Colorado.
That's right. You live.
And
how's the weather in Denver?
It's 75 degrees today, and there's still some leaves down here in the valley, in the Denver area. But most of the leaves up in the mountains are gone.
Okay,
so,
well,
good yellows, no reds, but a lot of yellows out here.
We are about 75, and I think the leaves are just at peak, maybe a wee bit past peak. So, anywho, all right. So, similar to my previous guest, Tim was one of the guys I've been looking forward to interviewing since I started this podcast. And not just because of the 9/11 connection that I gave in our introduction before we started talking. Tim and I worked together for a few years. He hired me to do some contract work at his company, and we even dabbled a little bit in trying to start our own company together, but that didn't get terribly far. But I think possibly the biggest influence he's had on me was that he was a big part of me deciding to make my tolerance analysis spreadsheet. PowerStack's available at my website. Forgive the shameless plug, but truth is truth. And finally, we may squeeze in discussing this, but Tim was also part of what I sometimes consider the longest job interview I ever had, which took, I think, 2 days. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about with respect to that?
I don't, but I should, I guess. I interviewed you for 2 days. Usually I don't interview for 2 days.
It wasn't officially.
It must have been a big question about you. I don't know.
It wasn't officially an interview, but it was sort of an interview, and we'll get to that in a little bit later.
Okay.
All right. So as we were having technical difficulties getting on this, which is unfortunately a par for the course, I did learn, in fact, I heard that unmistakable sound of a can opening, so I do know that Tim is enjoying a beer, and it's a very appropriately named beer, which is...
Ripping Through Dimensions. That's the one I'm drinking right now. And on deck, I have Memory Bias.
All right.
So... which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But I am kind of partial. Since I'm out in Denver, that's why I'm drinking these particular beers. And obviously, Ripping Through Dimensions has multiple meanings, especially for engineers, mechanical engineers. Right. And I'm kind of partial to Treehouse and Very Green with a bunch of G's in front of the green. So
are those Treehouse beers?
Favorites from home. I'm sorry?
Are those Treehouse beers?
Not these other two. These other two,
okay.
Yeah, right. These other two are local. So local to me that I actually walked over to the brewery last night and got them.
Well, that's nice.
I got the cans. It's Cerebral Brewing. There's another shameless plug for a local brewery.
Which is also a great name for a brewery.
Yeah, it is. I don't know how much Cerebral will apply to this conversation, but at least it's in the beer anyway.
We try to get a little bit. We have a shot of cerebrality. Is that a word? I guess maybe not.
I just made one up.
I just made it up. All right, so good. We have the intro out of the way. We got the beer drinking out of the way. The next part of the trifecta of starting this thing off is a joke. Do you have an engineering joke?
No, I don't have any jokes for engineers. Engineers, typically get such a bad rap anyway. I don't like to diss engineers any more than I being an engineer. Yeah, I think we can talk about some of the just general statements, I think, and we'll get to
Well,
some of them later too. But
well,
um,
I do remember your story. This is sort of a joke. There was the guy, I think it was probably Indian in background, and he was spelling something out, and then he said, "We" as in Victor. Do you remember
yeah,
that? And
yeah,
then
I
that just
do,
kind of mushroomed in
and
all
yeah, it
sorts of
became a.
things.
We haven't named this yet, and this is yours. This, oh my gosh, this is like the first time we're talking about this, and it may actually we have to come up with the actual term for what this is, but we came up with a whole, like they have the military, Echo, Bravo,
Right, right.
Delta,
Yep,
to
yep.
make sure you get the correct letter for a spelling. And so we, based on that conversation we overheard, he had also mentioned Y as in you,
Why is it you
for
is
the
good.
for something he was spelling. So Y as in you, and then it became a whll. We came up, a bunch of engineers sitting around at lunch trying to figure out what we, what were the other words. So
Yeah, there's a
A is in,
handful more.
yeah, A is in R, S is in
Let's
C,
see. E is an I.
D is in W. Like, how would you spell W without a D, right?
Uh,
Y is in U,
Why is it
W
you?
is in Y, S
W
is in
has and Y. I forgot about
S is
that.
in S is in C, right? S is in C. Um, yeah,
I
there's a
forgot
bunch
the.
of them. I can't remember all of them. I should write them all down. And I was going to save that for when I go on tour for my stand up comedy.
Yep, yep,
But I have to come up with a name for it first, and then get the Oxford
yep,
dictionary to actually put that in and actually make
yep.
it a legitimate thing. So
Well, there
um,
is a term for those military words, and I guess the default description would be the. I want to say semaphore. Is that right?
no, maybe.
If that's right, we'll check. And then
Yeah,
there's
let's confirm that, and then
the
we'll.
anti semaphore alphabet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Instead of
The
the most
confusing.
clear, it's the most
Yeah,
confusing words you
yeah,
can use.
yeah. Use another word to just that starts with a different letter
Exactly,
to
exactly.
to define the word you're trying to, or the letter you're
All
trying to
righty.
describe.
So the next part of this is ask a little about your background. You became an engineer, but I'm going to preempt that for a moment. I have as my memory that you spent some time in the military. Is that correct?
A little bit. So I was ROTC
Okay.
in college, but yeah, so that was part of the reason I went to the university, or the institution that I went to. So I would say I was institutionalized after high school.
And we've
Um,
been saying that for years, Tim.
right, right, and if yeah, exactly. But I went to RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which
Yep.
ironically is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year,
Is it?
18,
Good for them.
1824. Yeah, it's the oldest technological college or university in the country, besides behind the Naval Academy and the Army.
So it's older than MIT.
Okay. Yeah, older than MIT.
Interesting. Oh,
So
well, good for you.
yeah, I'm also celebrating my 40th year as an engineer. I graduated in '84, so
All right, good.
RPI. But yeah, I did RTC for a couple of years. I did 2 years, and then I had some co-ops and tried to negotiate with the Defense Department to get a guaranteed pilot slot, and I got it, but it was in the Marines and not in the Navy, and I wanted to stay in the Navy.
Okay.
So, but anyway, yeah, so that worked out really well for me for 2 years, and I learned a lot. Spent some time on a guided missile cruiser. So, but really, yeah, it was definitely a learning, and that's something that we can talk about over the course of my career. And anyone who's listening that is any point in their career is just, obviously you want to learn as much as you possibly can in
Yep.
whatever position you're in, even if it's a startup. Obviously, you learn a lot, but in a larger company, figure out ways that you can learn, and we'll talk about that a
Yep.
little bit later too. As far as personally, my focus has been kids. For the last, gosh,
20
I don't know
years,
how many
25
years.
years. How old's
Yeah,
Aaron?
something like that. So Aaron's 34, and
Must be that old.
grandkids, which is why I'm out here in Denver, and Jack and Ada, 2 and 1, and son-in-law Scott, and then the two kids that one just graduated from the two boys. One just graduated from college and is off running around and seeing the world and working remote in Bali, I think, right now. And then the other one just started school. It's just started
Okay.
at University of Utah. So yeah. So the kids are, it's empty nest for me. So we can talk about this maybe a little later. But
All right.
I think I'm at a point in my career I can maybe do something different and
Cool.
start dropping the focus a little bit more on at least the kids at home, being a empty nester now,
Right.
and I'm focusing on the grandkids, which is why I'm out here in Denver. So
Good, good. So where did engineering come from? How did that? How did you make that
yeah, that's a
decision?
good question, and I thought about that because there's had some of these questions ahead of time, and it's I have a family. I'll go back on my father's side, just a family of engineers and
Yeah. Okay.
accountants, and in industry, the industries in particular were railroad and steel, because those were the big industries of the day.
Right.
And my father worked for Bethlehem Steel, and my family working for different railroads over the past, and those were the big mechanical
Right.
industries of the day. So yeah, I think that's come from I don't know if it is is hereditary or
Yeah.
not, but
A little nature, a little
a
nurture,
little,
a
yeah, a
little
little
both.
bit. And and I had a father that worked on cars a lot, and back then that was that was where I spent a lot of my time, at cars and motorcycles and things like that, things mechanical.
Okay.
So I think that's where I got the interest.
Now, did you put any of your engine? Which engine? Mechanical? I'm just guessing.
Yeah, mechanical. I
Okay.
started off as a biomedical engineer, and obviously I was in the Navy, so the Navy didn't know what to do with a biomedical engineer, and they were kind of pushing me into other spaces. And
Right.
then,
Right.
I had fraternity brothers at the time. Biomedical engineering was a new field. There weren't that many universities that offered it. I think BU and Tulane, I applied and could have gone to both of those. And Lehigh had something that they were kind of putting
Right.
together.
Okay.
Yeah, just kind of they would piece it together with the biology department. So it was a major that nobody knew what it was at the time. And I had, again, fraternity brothers that were graduating that had a difficult time getting a job. And I'm like, well, this is basically the hardest classes of the engineering school. You had organic chemistry, 1 and 2, OChem, PChem, on biology, the
Right.
worst biology classes. And then, like I'd have like thermodynamics and, the mechanical classes, and then electrical engineering classes. They seemed to put the hardest ones on, everyone else was taking their electives were much more liberal arts focused, and
Right.
mine was like organic chemistry. So
that's a
yeah,
that's a pretty sick elective.
yeah,
What
yeah,
was it?
it was not good. And then I was on the swim team, pledging a fraternity, and then ROTC all at the same time. So
So you're a busy
it
boy.
was yeah,
Busy
it was
boy back
crazy.
then.
It was a little crazy. I learned my limits, right?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
something else everyone needs to learn where the
Because
limits
you're
are. And
definitely
in
you're
high
definitely
school, you
exploring
come out
them.
of high
That's for
school, you
sure.
think you're invincible, and then you do something like that for a semester, and you're like, wow,
Right. Yeah.
I am invincible, or I am invincible, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm certainly beatable. That's for
Right.
sure. That's
Did
for sure.
in the Navy, was your degree put to use in any way, or not so much?
Yeah, no, not so much. It was it was did a rotation, so we got a chance to experience all the different aspects of being on board ship, propulsion, and working the engine room, working on the deck, refueling at sea, all that stuff. So a lot of it was mechanical. I'm
Hmm.
sure a lot of it's changed, and a lot more is electronics. There was something we called the Bat Cave, which was where all the radar and it was a CIC, I think it was called, and it was basically it was where all the radar and all the intelligence was. And so you'd spend time up there in the dark looking at
Right.
monitors and screens and things. And so electronics have really come a long way, and radar has come a long way too since then.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's a slightly different focus, but you still have to move the ship, and a lot of those systems are mechanical.
Right. Right. All right. So I was perusing your LinkedIn profile earlier, and I'm just a trend or whatever is coming to mind. I think first half of your career, maybe the exception of the very first job or two, was kind of at product development firms where we worked together at Radius. And then the last 15, 20 years has been completely not at product development firms. Large companies, or I think maybe a startup or two. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the first job out of, I think we're going to go, maybe answer some other questions. But my first job out of school was,
Oh, I don't go in order at all. So if you got
okay, we're going to jump around a little bit. All
I'm
right.
Joe,
Well, I'm not going to hold back. I'm just going to
King of
go.
That's right, right.
Okay.
I'm in charge
Um,
here, Tim. Don't forget.
I better take another sip of beer then. Um, so yeah, first job out of school, I went to a company called Teradyne, which back in the day was vertically integrated, which not many companies are these days. Most
Right,
companies are outsourcing everything. But back then, the trend, coming from probably the big consulting firms, was you want to be vertically integrated, control all your manufacturing and your
right,
products and your processes, and keep it as a proprietary, skill and knowledge base, so that you can maintain an advantage over your competitors. and
right,
and so that
right.
was a huge effort. And that was a company that particular division in Nashua, New Hampshire, was their connection systems division. So they made a lot of connectors and backplanes and things like that. They, as it related to computing and telecommunications at the time. So it was a great place to learn because they built injection mold tools, they molded parts, they did progressive die stamping. Mostly went outside for some of that, but we designed all those components and had a very close relationship with almost a captive
Sure.
progressive die stamping facility in Pennsylvania, and then precious metal plating, and it went on and on and on. Aluminum fabrication. We used some outside extrusion houses, again, almost captive. So it was a great place to learn because, we'd had raw materials coming in the form of, plastics, or we'd actually build our own printed circuit boards at the division down the street. And so it was a great place to see all that and have responsibility for product and design and development. So,
Right.
yeah, fantastic place to learn. And, if you have that opportunity, obviously, as a new engineer, and that was why I went there. I felt like, what a better place to learn if you're going to design products than to
Yeah, you hit it all there,
have a
soup to
place
nuts.
that has all the manufacturing, because ultimately it has to be manufactured. So,
Right. All right. Well, that's good. I wonder, I mean, I've been a fan of vertical integration for a long time, and kind of puzzled me why people seem to be going away from it so much. And it used to be much more common. I wonder if, maybe the pendulum has gone as far as it's going to go, and maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, it's going to start coming back. It feels like it's coming back a little bit. Agree? Disagree?
yeah. In some instances, yeah. I mean, there's obviously core technology that companies are developing that they want to maintain.
Right.
Although a lot of contract manufacturing, I mean, you just look at the semiconductor industry right now, and Taiwan Semi, and all the big semiconductor designers are all having their fab being done over there, or obviously Intel's trying to build
Okay. Right.
a big core technology facility here in Ohio, and funded by the government. But I think what's happening is it's those are such specific skills, and there's such deep skill sets that are learned over decades that it's just really hard to break into that. Although
Right.
some newer technology that's coming out, I think those will be some core technology. The company I'm at right now has some sensor development that they have as proprietary to them, and they just there's always those little pockets, but I don't think full integration. I don't think every company should be injection molding or
Right. I think
those kind of things. So
it may have been too much back in the day, but it feels to me it's gone too much, and kind of, as those pendulums want to do, they swing back and forth before coming to rest in the middle.
right,
Not sure
exactly.
how many more cycles there are of it, but my opinion, a little more vertical integration I think would be beneficial. But to build on the teaser I gave you, Tim and I met. I was working at Becton Dickinson in New Jersey, and you were, I think the company was Microplast at the time, later became Radius.
Mm-hmm.
And Microplast's parent company was Nipro. I was visiting Nipro. They were a prospective supplier at the time. I forget which it was, but we were getting a tour of Nipro and happened to walk by your area, which was temporarily displaced into the Nipro building. And anyways, getting off of too many details. So when I was, and I saw what you guys did, I said, oh, that's interesting. That might be a place I would like to work sometime. And so I was, in New Jersey, and you were in Massachusetts. And I think you gave me and this other gentleman a little tour of Radius and what you did. And so, like I said, a little mental note. And then maybe a year or so later, the project we were working on with Nipro, I forget the exact circumstances, but someone said, hey, we should have some outside product development firm take a look at this, sort of a little design review kind of thing. And we hired you, or your company, was Radius at the time. And I think it was you and Bill Kane came down to New Jersey, or we come up. I think you came down. And
I think it came down. I think it was back and forth, but it came down. I think it
was either an FMEA or a design review or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it went on at least a day. It might have been 2 days. I don't remember.
It was actually 2 days. Yeah.
Was it 2 days? Okay, so you remember that. And so, a little teaser. It was not an interview, but I think in my brain it was tiny little bit of an interview because, like I said, in my mind it's like a fun place to work sometime.
Hmm.
And so it was 2 days of you examining my work and standing up and blah 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 blah. And a year or so later, when I applied to Radius, there was something like there was no jobs you had open. I just threw my resume over there and said, "Hey, please hire me because I got to get out of here."
Hmm.
So I don't know how much that 2 day design review that you and Bill Witness had on me getting hired eventually, but it was a interesting tidbit in our relationship.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had a similar experience where when I was at Teradyne, I happened to get a design news magazine at the time, and this is before the internet, so that
Right.
tells you how long ago it was. Where you got all your information on them in
All these
magazines that would
magazines,
get
yep.
delivered, yeah, by mail, by U.S. mail. And they had a cover issue on product design and industrial design and product development,
Okay.
and I was like, wow, you can actually be a consultant and design, interesting products and maybe not connect or switch, are interesting in their own right. But I had
Right.
been there for 6 or 7 years, and it was kind of like one of those things where if you stay there too long, you become an expert in that, and when you
Mm.
go to look for another job, it's like, well, okay, you're an expert in connectors. We have a connector job for you. The next step in your career would be
Right.
in that same field because
Bigger
you have all
connectors,
the experience.
left-handed
Yeah,
connectors.
right, exactly. So the nice thing about the field of product development consulting is that you get exposure to a lot of different products.
Yep.
And I started off more focused on I went back even prior to Radius on a lot of consumer products. And
Right.
at one point in my career, I took my daughter Erin up and down the aisles of Walmart, and I could pick one product on each aisle that I had worked on at some
Really?
point. Yeah, yeah,
That
it was
many
that
consumer
crazy.
products. That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
a lot of work for Black and Decker and DeWalt and
Okay.
Brita, and I could go on and on. But yeah, and Arm and Hammer. I mean, just you name it, and that was fun and interesting. And then a lot of that kind of went offshore and kind of died down a little bit. There's still some of it in stateside, so I moved to medical, and I just
Yep.
think that was a good move. Which obviously being FDA regulated and knowing that would stay stateside.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I had a lot of interest in that also, being that I wanted to be a biomedical engineer at some point in my life
Yep.
early on, and so I kind of came full circle and came back to medical. So you never know where
Works.
that point is you never know where your career is going to take you.
Right. Right.
I think Steve Jobs says it's hard to connect the points looking forward, but looking back, it's really easy to connect the points and how things
I
contribute to your
Yeah,
career.
I agree 100%. If this topic has come up a handful of times, did you do much career planning? I want to be here in 5 years, here in 10 years, or just sort of keep your eyes open and see what?
No, no, I kind of learned what I didn't want to do, and I didn't want to, and
Which is
I did,
helpful.
yeah. That's one thing. If you're not learning exactly what you want to do, you can always learn what you don't want to do, and,
Yep.
and
Yep.
eliminate the things. But yeah, I think I didn't want to be too high up in management. I always wanted to stay closer to engineering, so I had
Okay.
opportunities to move up the ranks and be vice presidents and president, running small companies and
Right.
things. And then, but I found that I just and I was in a few companies at that level, and I just found that I was spending a lot of time doing a lot of business development work and corporate development work and presentations and just so far removed from the engineering that I just didn't like it. I
Right.
thought I can contribute more at the engineering level than um, than at the corporate level. I
Yeah.
didn't have an MBA, and that wasn't what I really wanted to do. Although I
Sure.
started taking courses towards that, and I just said, this is not me. So yeah, don't always aspire to be don't always chase the money. And there's
Yep.
opportunities, and I'm still, I say I haven't finalized my career yet. I'm getting closer to
Got a few
retirement
years
age,
left.
but I may not retire, not in the near future. So I have a few more moonshots, and
Yep.
again, with an empty nest, I might be able to do some of those things. So
Now
um,
that
go
was
ahead.
interesting because personally, I have very little interest in management and come across and talk to many engineers who are in similar boats. Like, no, I'm happy being an engineer. And I don't recall either on this podcast or just walking through life, someone such as yourself saying, no, I like the middle management. I don't want to go high up. That's different. Like you said, you want to keep at least one foot in the technical aspect of it. And yeah, I mean, if you found your niche and what you enjoy, that works. That's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. I know we can. I don't want to kind of jump jump to the end here, or jump to some of our other discussions that we talked about.
Well,
But
I think I'm about ready to.
you want me to? Okay.
Depends which one you're going to.
Well, yeah.
Let me try.
So
Let me try and read your mind,
go ahead.
and I'll control the segue here. And if it
Okay.
fails, burns, then it's my fault and not yours. So, in that role as director, I guess mostly director. I think VP here or there, but maybe smaller companies, which might be more of a director role.
Yeah, you can be whatever you want in a small company.
What do you do well there? You like having the foot in the technical end of it, but there's more to that job than just I've said many times there's people that do it and people that make sure it gets happened, and then people decide what it is. So middle management is making sure it happens. What I guess what do you do to make sure it happens? What are the steps and things that you do?
Yeah. So in a number of the positions I got later on in my career, I was asked to take on was managing engineering teams, and the main part of that was building the teams. Some of it was rebuilding the teams. I've come into some companies where management or the board of directors have asked, what's your opinion of this product, and is this a will this get through the FDA on a 510K submission, or are we we need to take a step back, and they kind of had a feeling that things weren't 100%, but the existing team was
if you're asking the
confident in it.
question.
Yeah, then I looked at it and I kind of told them what they thought, and
Right.
and then they would ask me to come in the last couple of companies coming in, okay, well then what should we do? Okay, and so it was building the teams or rebuilding the teams, and then rebuilding the products based on the requirements and FDA requirements and our own product requirements, and it's sometimes was the whole new team. I mean, 25 people to 14 people, but all those 14 people were new within a year and a half. So, again, trying to maintain some of the tribal knowledge and then changing out an entire team is difficult to do.
Sure.
But you can do it. And then, in other cases, changing direction and utilizing the team that has the tribal knowledge, but then obviously, giving them enough guidance and showing them why the direction we're heading is the right direction and why we're doing it. And if they come on board, that's great. If they don't, hopefully learn something from it. And that's the other thing is that most of these companies are one of the phrases that I like to use. Typically you're either learning or you're earning. And it's great if you can do both. If
I've just heard that for the first time in the last month or two, and I think you're like the third time I've seen it now.
Yeah, I can't remember. Somebody said it, and I'm stealing, someone else's line. But I like that because you want to obviously make money, so you're going to make something. But there, a lot of times, we're going to start up that doesn't have a lot of money. Maybe get stock options. Maybe they actually turn into something as opposed to wallpaper, which most of mine have. But they're
not even wallpaper anymore. They're just all virtual, right? It's not even wallpaper.
It's not even wallpaper. Well, there's some documentation behind it. But it's all electronic. But anyway, it's you want to certainly always be learning, and I think that's what keeps teams working together and focused on a goal, and particularly on a product. And I think most engineers are really excited about something that's interesting in a interesting space with some interesting technology, and these days it's typically AI. If you have some AI, which the product I'm working on right now has AI in it, but it has a little bit of everything in it, which is great. It has pneumatics and fluidics and precision stages and microscopes and deionizers and sample prep automation and all sorts of things. So so that keeps the engineers kind of excited. And and the other thing is picking people. I mean, that was part of it. Is building the teams is critical to find the people that can learn or that want to learn and build their careers. For instance, we just developed an optics system for an imaging microscope that or portion of our system that is that the team didn't have deep experience in. They had some, and we learned a lot and brought in consultants, and were able to pull off a pretty good solution, which we like. We may have, at least for our engineering prototype, it works great. We may do some commercialization effort with some optics experts now that we probably get some funding for that. So,
So,
but be willing to learn. The only way we were able to pull this off, we didn't have the funding to hire one of these, optics consultants externally. So we did it internally, and we were able to get what we needed, which is fantastic. So yeah,
so
be open to learning.
you've partially answered the question I haven't asked yet. What did you see in those teams that told you it was needed rebuilding, and maybe it was just a product that wasn't working? And then what are you looking for to build that team? And it sounds like people willing to learn seems to be one thing you're looking for. What else is there besides that?
Yeah, open to new ideas. I think that's the big thing, is the people that, the companies, funded 2 to 3 years worth of development effort, and the prior team took the product into a certain direction, with certain core technology or architectures that maybe aren't the most reliable or the most stable, or pass an FDA rigor of review. So
So,
you always have to be open for ideas, open for change,
so let me
challenge yourself, that
let
kind
me
of thing.
well, let me
That's
challenge you.
yeah. Go ahead.
the just because engineers went down a path that turned out to be the wrong path, I'm not sure it's necessarily so that they're not open to new ideas, unless they were presented new ideas, two steps down that path and rejected ones and said, no, I'm going 3, 4, and 5 and 6 steps down the road. Does that make any sense? Or am I?
Yeah, no, there's some people that I've run into or have heard about in the past in management and in engineering, that they'll come up with an idea, and their first idea is the one they're going to go with, and it's
Right.
their idea, and they move forward with it. I don't agree with that 100%, unless someone is that brilliant and they come up with the right idea every time, the first idea,
Right. Right.
which
Yeah.
is rare, but some people do
Happens once in a while.
once in a while. So I always like to open it up and kind of challenge the team, and then kind of let them, see if they can come up with some ideas, but challenge them. For example, we had a section of the product we're working on now that we have to transfer a cartridge through our sample prep system into our imaging system. And people come up with interesting ideas and ways of transporting and rotating and pivoting and conveyor belts and things like that, interesting things. And I said, well, let's see if we can do it without any parts, instead of all these motors and things.
Right.
And
Right.
in the end, we did. And
It's always nice to remove parts.
yeah, and that's another thing. That's another saying that I like to have, and typically it's been directed towards industrial design, but it's also applicable to engineering, in that your work is done not when there's nothing more to add, it's done when there's nothing more to take away, right? So if you can
Yep.
design
Yep.
something, again, mechanically, the simplest concept, and again, not to be too cute and design it so simple that it fails, but design it so that less parts is obviously less cost to manufacture, and then obviously less parts to wear out or fail. So if you can do it without any parts, then do it. And
Yeah. I think
it's interesting.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
Elon Musk is huge on that.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
look up
and
the engines for SpaceX, you look at the first generation to the current generation, it's like a quarter of the parts and a third the cost, or I'm not sure the exact numbers, but just looking at it, you see, you got in mind the engines from Apollo, watching the Apollo 13 movie, and there's just like
mhm.
a zillion things. It's like, wow, look at that, it's impressive.
Well,
But then
you can take.
you look at the
Go
most
ahead.
recent SpaceX motor, and it's almost simple. It's like this cone with a few little things on the outside.
Mhm.
And it's like, on the one hand, one looks more technologically imposing, but the one that's got fewer parts doing the same job is in fact more technologically advanced.
Mhm. Exactly. So I mean, I'm somewhat of a fan of Elon Musk. Not in everything he does
Sure.
gets involved in, but in some things, and particularly on the engineering or technology side. And when he travels, I mean, this is something that I think his first wife mentioned, was that when they would travel, he would fill out his visa form, or his documents, his immigration documents, and his profession would be engineer, even though he was never an actual degreed engineer. But
Really?
that was something I think he always kind of aspired to, and he just felt that was a kind of what he did, was engineering. But again, going to I
So
have a
he's a
Tesla.
trans engineer. He just identifies as an engineer.
Yeah, everyone wants to be an engineer, right? um,
Because we're so
so
funny.
well, exactly. So you take a look at it. I have a Tesla Model Y, and if you look at it, I mean, all the controls are on the display, right?
Hmm.
Everything's on a display. There's and I look at some other cars that I've had, and there's so many different components and knobs and buttons and things that can fail over time. And I have
Yep.
some older cars, and typically that's the problem, is the switches and they get corroded and wear. And working in the connector industry, as I mentioned earlier, that was usually the first problem or first failure mode would be connectors. So whenever there's a system wasn't working, people, even if it wasn't the connector, people would call us and say, my connector's failing. It's
Right,
like
right, right.
we'd go out as an application engineer, go out on the tour, and most of the time it was was the connectors, but there were a lot of poor applications of our
Right.
systems where they didn't follow the requirements. But they're they are a failure point. So
Yep.
so if you can eliminate as much of that as possible, you've got a much more reliable system, and your bill of materials drops significantly.
Right.
It would be
Right.
interesting to look at a bill of materials between an internal combustion engine driven car, motivated car, versus a Tesla
Electric.
or any electric
Yeah.
car. And
Oh,
just
it's
the full number
hugely
of
different.
components has got to be very, very different.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's something the UAW is painfully aware of and seeing. Wait a minute, these all electric cars is going to mean fewer jobs for UAW members. There's growing pains to growth and technological advancement, but so
yeah, exactly. And then there's plenty of other technologies that people get involved in, and it's more robotics and applying robotics and automation to manufacturing. And there's
no.
should be plenty of that, especially with a lot of the reshoring that's going on right now in industry.
So what in your current jobs? I suppose maybe you could go back to previous jobs. What gives you the most satisfaction? You're going home at the end of the day. It's like, it makes you really enjoy that beer instead of getting home saying, "My gosh, I need a beer."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think a lot of it has to do, especially in the started off in the consulting, where I really realized this consulting world was you really need good people. And,
Right.
the phrase, I think it might have been Steve Jobs that said this, that, A players hire A players,
Mm,
and B players hire like C and D players, or B, C, and D players.
right.
You really want to have and the A players want to work with A players.
Yep.
And I found that out in consulting, because obviously if you're a consultant, you've got to bring something to the table, because, I've had clients say, well, you're charging this exorbitant rate because you're an expert and you know what you're doing.
Right.
That's why I'm paying you the money I'm paying you.
Yeah.
So obviously I expect this to work right out of the gate and, have much higher level of standards.
Yep.
And so when you have those kind of, that kind of gun to your head, and every time you go out and you meet with a potential client and, they have another project that is difficult. I mean, the consulting side of things is really difficult. I mean, any new product development effort is difficult.
Right.
You just don't know what's happening out there from an IP landscape. You could have a patent, which have had happen, drop right on top of exactly what we were doing while we were in the middle of it, just prior to releasing for about $500,000 for the tooling, which
Yeah.
the client was disappointed, was mad about it. But my point was, well, it's good we didn't spend the money, because we would have
Right.
ruined it
Right.
all. I'm going to change our direction anyway.
It's better before
Um,
with that purchase order instead of after.
right. But my point is that you really need good people. Knowing that I had good people back at the consulting company, I felt more confident making promises to potential clients, because when you're typically in these consulting roles, you start off, actually doing the work, and then you start building the team. And then ultimately you've got to go out and keep the team fed. You have
Yep.
that high level of responsibility. And I felt responsible for the team, because I brought them in, like yourself, from other companies, well-paying, pretty established companies.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in a startup type of, smaller consulting team, or a role, a firm. And, let's make sure we can deliver on what we promise. And the way to do that is to have a solid team back at the consulting firm, and maybe be able to make promises that I knew we could keep one way or
Right.
another, even though we had never done it before
Yep. So let me.
in that particular field.
Right. So in your working as director of engineering and feeling that's your sweet spot, did you get there through some innate talent, or did you have good mentors that you learned from, or how much of a combination was that?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. I think I had some good mentors early on. My first couple of jobs and positions, even in co-op, I had some really good mentors. I
Mm-hmm.
worked at, and I would recommend, those who haven't, or in college still haven't graduated. Obviously, co-op is a big thing, and I
Sure.
co-opted at IBM and Digital, which were at the time were some of the best in the larger mid-size computing markets. And it's good to get out there. And I had mentors that, that was part of their co-op program, was to mentor people and engineers, and obviously determine whether or not they were people you wanted to hire. And it was both ways. I had to determine whether it was a company I wanted to work for
Right.
when I graduated. And so, yeah, so I felt like, they were good mentors. My first position, out of college was at Teradyne, and had a really good mentor there. He was very technical and skilled. And, I think at one point he said, I was trying to make a decision on I had 8 different ideas on how to solve a problem.
Right.
And he, I said, I'm looking for input because here I am, a junior engineer, I just out of school. I don't know
Right.
which one's the best. And he goes, well, I can tell you which ones I like. But he said, your job, Tim, is you came up with 8 ideas, or 10 ideas, I think I had. He said 2 of them will fail miserably. Your job is to make sure you don't pick those 2. And he said, probably another 6 or 7 will or maybe 6 will be fine. They'll work okay. But there's the other 2 that are really good.
Right.
Those are the 2 you want to really figure out and pick. And then what's the criteria? Obviously aligning it to requirements and such. And then, particularly life, usability in life and those type of things, product life was critical. And so making those decisions the proper way was great. And I think some of the guidance, I decided to say this to newer engineers now is, and I was involved early on in rapid prototyping, is that, really, like in 1988, I think we had our first SLA machine. Yeah, an SLA-1.
You beat me by a couple of years.
Yeah.
I thought I was
we
early.
had an SLA-1 back in, I think it came out in 1987. So at AutoFact, and in 88, we bought one at Sanson Engineering. And it's turned into obviously that's we talked about technology and how it's developed over in, the years in product development. Obviously, CAD is the biggest thing, because when I started off at college, I started off in CAD and 2D, and then 3D wireframe,
right,
and surfacing and such, and then how it's evolved to where it is now, where it's ubiquitous, as everybody's got a CD CAD, and it's great. But back then, in those early days, and you had Charlie Sears on the podcast at one point. And I remember going out and visiting with clients who were kind of on the bleeding edge of rapid prototyping at the time, and people would send us give us their stack of 2D drawings and ask for their parts tomorrow. And I'd have to explain what 3D CAD was in those days. But Charlie would have to recreate the 2D CAD model
from the
in
drawing.
CAD, from a 2D drawing into 3D, so that he could actually print it in an SLA machine. Yeah. So, but I think it's become a crutch. You have to be careful of that. I think that technology, as much as I was kind of on the forefront of that, I think you just have to be careful, because people come up with those 10 ideas, and because it's so simple, it's like printing to a paper printer. It's like, well, I'll just print this, and I'll print this, and I'll print this, and I'll print this. Yep. And in the end, you're making a lot of landfill. And I would say, this is something else, is if you can find a really good mentor, someone who's kind of been there, done that, and made those 10 prototypes, and can kind of tell you, listen, these 2 will fail miserably, these 6 will be okay, and I would build these 2 because they're the most promising, and these are the reasons why. So you don't have to make the same mistakes, and just don't hit print, and then you spend days sanding and putting something together that, in the end, it's an interesting way to learn, but it's, especially if you're consulting, if you're in product development consulting, your client's not going to want to pay the fees, the hourly rate that you'd have to charge them for someone to clean and build a prototype, right? Right. When you should have much lower cost labor doing that work. So just keep that in mind. That's one of my big pet peeves.
Okay. All right. So I want to, we are getting long in time. I want to go into our first ever science experiment on Beers with Engineers. I want to talk about, I told you this before, 9/11. So you're my 9/11 guy. I'm your 9/11 guy. We were sitting together when we found out about it. And I remember 10, 12 years ago, somehow we were talking about it. And very quickly we disagreed with the events of that morning at work. Did you remember that at all, that we did that?
I remember it somewhat. I just remember that what I thought was correct. and I'm not sure where you're getting your
Exactly. All right, so
so that's where memory bias comes in, right? That's the next beer I'm
the
moving on
next
to.
beer,
Actually,
memory
I'm going to
bias.
open that
Right.
one up right now. Actually,
Okay, that's a perfect timing. All right, we'll
Mhm. Yeah,
crack open a memory bias.
I'm going to crack open a memory bias by Cerebral Brewing in Denver, Colorado. That's right.
Yep.
So I'm going to put that right near the microphone so
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
can hear that,
beautiful.
just like your kind of tag video there.
That's real beer can opening as opposed to the clip in the opening of a fake beer can opening. Anywho, all right. So I think I'll let you start, and we'll see how long we go before I say no. That's not what happened, Tim. So
So
we'll let you go.
how I remember it was we were sitting at a building in Union Street in Clinton, working
Yep.
for Radius product development,
Yep.
and I remember Linda Drabeck saying that her husband had called Michael and said that a plane had just hit the World Trade Center.
So now, did
And
you
of
hear
course,
her say that, or did?
I heard her say that.
Yes, that's not what
Yeah,
I remember.
see, that's memory bias, right?
Memory
So,
bias.
so
So
with
go on.
that,
I'll tell you what really happened in a few minutes.
okay, I initially thought it was just like a small plane,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
sometimes that happens, whatever, not a good thing. Not knowing that it was, and then I think later on, I think she mentioned, like not too long, like a few minutes later, said, no, it was a commercial airline. And so then I went to CNN and I basically got CNN on the computer and it just froze as I got a picture of, I think, the second plane or
Okay.
something
Yep.
coming in, and I think they had a video of that, and it froze. So at that point, we knew something big was going on.
Yep.
So
Yep.
a bunch of us, and I'm not sure if you were even part of that group, we went to a pub down the street that we knew had a big TV, and this is now
Oh,
like
okay.
around 10:30, 11
Yeah.
o'clock, and we knew
I
that
did
they
not
were.
go. There was an audit going on across the street
Okay.
for the Alchemies project, if you remember. The audit was that day. That guy
Yeah.
luckily landed in Boston before everything was closed down. So, anyways, continue.
Yeah. So we went down the street and then watched it on a TV that wasn't frozen like my computer, and
Yeah.
we were able to see what was going on. So we did have people all over the country. I know people had to take rent-a-cars back, etc.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's how I remember it. And I do remember we did have, personally, we had friends visiting from the West Coast who were actually supposedly on that flight, one of the flight from Boston to LA, and it actually
They were supposed to be on it?
they had actually changed their flight plans and went Monday, as they were building a new house and they were doing the excavating on Monday, so they or Monday afternoon, so they flew out to Idaho.
The day early.
Changed their flight. Yeah, the day before on Monday,
Yeah.
and they still have those tickets. They have them framed and put on the wall.
Oh,
Back
really?
then, in those days, you actually have physical
Actually
tickets.
had airline. I remember. Yeah, you had paper tickets, paper stock
They had
forms.
physical tickets. Yeah, so they had changed it, and they had stapled. They had the original tickets stapled to it. So
that's interesting.
and they got 3 calls from the FBI wondering why they changed their itinerary the day before within 24 hours. But anyway. Yeah, that's how I remember it.
Not surprising the FBI. I mean, you got to uncover every stone in that case.
Mm-hmm.
So my memory, yes, we were at work. We were sitting in your cube. I recall I was waiting to talk to you about whatever, and I recall you were on the phone, and then I overheard Linda saying, and I didn't hear clear. I just heard plane, World Trade Center, and not much greater detail than that. And then when you got off the phone, I said, "Yeah, go to CNN." I thought I heard Linda say something about a plane hitting the World Trade Center. And, again, I'm assuming it's some little 2-seater that got lost in the fog and, hit it and winged, did a little damage there. And then CNN comes up, and I think we got it to come up fairly quickly. And the headline said, "Second plane hits World Trade Center."
Mm-hmm.
And we both said, "Oh, crap." Yeah,
and I remember CNN locked up at that point too.
That sounds right too. Yeah, that was
it. Was it. There were so many people on that
so many people
website looking for information. So that was an interesting day, unfortunately.
So it's
not what we expected that day to be.
So it's a good thing we're not witnesses for any trial, because our stories would not have aligned, and we would have been bad.
Yeah, it's the memory bias. Yeah,
somebody would have been.
yeah, exactly.
So,
but
So, we still disagree on what happened that day. The most remarkable thing the most remarkable thing I ever heard was that some professor at some college, like on September 12th, told his class, all right, write down what happened yesterday. Pen and paper, give it to me, put it in an envelope, seal it. And like a year or two later, he rounded up those people and gave it back to him. And people were saying, I don't know where you got this, but I didn't write this, and that's not what happened.
Mm.
Which is just mind blowing that in a year or two, I forget what they call it, sear impact memory, or there's some term for it which escapes me at the moment. But I will never forget what happened that day.
Mm.
Well, me and you, one of us has forgotten and gotten it wrong. I mean, not hugely wrong, but slightly significant. But anywho, very good. All right, so our live experiment. I'll write up a paper and get it published as soon as I can. All right, so
Great.
enough of that stuff. So we started out, you're like dad, moved into granddad. Anything else you're doing for fun besides dadding and granddadding?
Yeah, well, I have some hobbies. I do collect and kind of and fix older cars, mostly Porsches.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And yeah, I've kind of gotten into that a little bit and do some autocrossing, and I haven't done it in a couple of years, but I'm gonna get back to it. I
Yeah,
gotta get my cars running again.
I was
Yeah.
out on a bike ride and stopped by your house, and weren't there three Porsches in the driveway in various states of repair or disrepair?
Yeah. At one point there were four. I think there's yeah. I've culled the herd down to two now.
And then what was
There's just
it?
too much work. There's always something going on with those.
And then
But they're all
you also had a
125.
Prius,
Yeah.
and then somebody gave you a bumper sticker that said Pre-Orsh or some mashup
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Prius and
My
Porsche.
kids are always giving me a hard
Oh, that
time
was from
about
your
that
kids.
Priorsha or whatever it was. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I like things that there's reasons I have each purchase things and cars, and there's the Porsche obviously has great engineering.
Yep.
The rear engine is just interesting. That whole application of how to propel a car, and if you watch the Ferrari movie, you have Enzo Ferrari is always talking about the Ferraris and how the horse is always before the cart, and basically that's how you power your cars. Whereas
Mm,
Porsche was, hung a motor
horsepower.
off the back of behind the rear axle,
Yeah.
and very different approach. But if you think about it, there's reasons for it. Your drive shaft is very short,
Sure.
and I also have a mid-engine 914. That's a 50-year-old car that is mid-engine, which now in the last couple of years the Corvette has gone to mid-engine and
Right.
realized
Right.
that's the way to go for just weight
It
balance.
took them a
And
while.
yeah, it took them a while.
Yep.
Again, that was a 50-year-old car. But the 914 has a lot of, panache. And again, it's one of those cars where I'm sure everyone in there, based on your era of, of interest in cars and driving, as they grew up, has a car that they just remember. And
Right.
ultimately, in their at some point in their lives, they would love to have one of those cars. And
Hmm.
and I had there's a 914 in my fraternity that my fraternity brother would let me drive every once in a while to
Hmm.
go to pick up my girlfriend at the airport or something. And the car was just amazing, and I thought it was just really cool the way it was designed, and the approach and the architecture and everything. And for other reasons, the cars don't hang around too long. They've got rust issues and what they call the hell hole, which is below the battery. But a lot of the original architecture was really sound. What they
Hmm.
did with those cars, and so I've had interesting cars. The Prius is probably one of the best cars I've ever owned. I've had two of them. I've driven them over almost 600,000 miles over two
Wow.
Priuses.
That's pretty good.
I had an old Mercedes 300D, which that had almost 300,000 miles on it. It was a 5-speed, which is rare in the U.S. There's only like 12 of them in the U.S. They were brought over by servicemen. So I was looking for interesting cars, and that car too has got, it's got incredible longevity. The Priuses were little tanks. I love those little things.
Hmm.
I had an inline six Camaro that ran forever. So I'm always trying to, and of course I made mistakes, just like hiring. I think I've hired people that it's kind of learned from my mistakes. And that's why I really push the hiring and building of good teams. I've made mistakes on purchasing cars, and you learn from your mistakes.
Sure.
Sometimes they're very costly. Other times, if you can learn from somebody else's mistake, that's even better.
No, it's
But
always the way to go if you can.
yeah, so I figured, I bought a Tesla. It's the end of the Model Y. Kind of this is the last year before they go to the Juniper design. I
Okay.
figured they got all the bugs worked out by now.
Yep.
It should be a pretty solid car. And I just bought a Toyota Tacoma, a Generation 2, and I know those things are pretty solid. from at least, well, not from a rust standpoint. This one has a new frame put on it, so obviously rust seems to be a theme across all my cars.
Well, that's funny. I thought they'd largely licked rust by now.
Yeah, well, this is
Well, unless you
2007. This is a 2007.
okay.
It's a generation, a generation 2 Tacoma, and
Yep.
this has a new frame, so obviously it cost Toyota quite a bit of money, and they've since solved the problems.
Right.
Although now they have other problems. So yeah, again, from an engineering standpoint,
Always
we
those
need to
cars
be
are tough.
as good as we can. But the older Tacomas had a good reputation for longevity and just being solid cars, except for the frame. And once you got a new frame put on, they were great. Now they've got problems with the transmissions in the Tacomas and from what I understand, and the engines in the Tundras. So even don't seems as though they lost their ways. So the new 2023 24s, I think, have some issues. So, and all those are engineering based, right? Those are materials or decisions that are made by engineers that impact the brand, and obviously cost the company a lot of money if they're replacing tens of thousands of engines in Toyota Tundras right now.
Yeah, that costs a few bucks, more than I have in my bank account. Yeah, I think my impression is that the kids of today, the current generation's cars are much less important to them. Now, my oldest would be an exception to that. He's all into cars and this, that, and the other things, and which is fine. I mean, I kind of have fun chit and chatting about cars, and he's asking questions about, is turbocharger better than supercharger, than this, that, the other thing? I don't know. I kind of know what they are, but beyond that, it's not. But it's still fun to talk about cars. All right, it is about time to wrap up. So that means we've come to the grab bag question. If you've listened to an episode or two, hopefully you have, Tim. You give me a number from 1 to 10, and I've got a bunch of fairly random questions with which you will give me an answer to. So give me a number, 1 to 10.
5.
Number 5. I love this one. Wait for somebody
Can I pass?
to ask this. No, you may not. What is the oldest piece of clothing, including shoes, that you still use?
Oh, that I still use?
My
gosh. I was going to say that I still have. Including shoes.
Including shoes.
Oh, I know what it would be.
Okay.
I think. I still have my old military issue boots.
Really?
Yeah, the boots that I would run in, and they come up to almost the top of your calves, but
right.
They were the old school boots, black. You had to polish them.
Yep.
I still have those, and I don't have my motorcycle anymore, but that's what I used to ride my motorcycle on.
Okay,
I still have those, and they're
they're
well worn. They're well worn, and they're not as polished as they used to be, but
all right.
By requirement. But,
I know I have a couple of sweatshirts that I wear regularly. One's like completely fallen apart. The other one's much less so, but they're over 30 years old, early 90s, maybe even 80s possibly. And I still wear those regularly.
Well, if you're following the podcast, we started off saying I started off school in ROTC. That's when they issued those in 1980.
Okay. Oh, that's
so
it's new in 1980. So you've got the
44-year-old boots.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. Well, very good. Tim, this has been good fun. We learned a bit about team building, and we learned that your memory is bad when it comes to September 11th. Any comments, questions, speeches, anything to wrap up this little conversation we've had here?
No, I think maybe just a few lines that, like I said, maybe through the podcast, and that I kind of live by is that the A players hire A players. You want to make sure you're an A player, so you get hired, and that don't try and don't be open to ideas, other people's ideas. Don't jump on the first one, and engineering, don't add engineering for engineering's sake. Don't add the motor and don't add the mechanism if you don't need to. Simplify. The simpler the better in all design and engineering. Always maintain that as a kind of a personal requirement when you're designing and developing a product.
Yep.
And and maybe listen to your elders a little bit. Sometimes they're off the mark, and I get it, and I've seen it. But sometimes they are really wanting to help, and they
Yep.
do have the experience, and they can save you a lot of time and effort. If they are those kind, look for the higher quality, the mentors that are well respected and that have been with a company, or multiple companies and developed a lot of products. And you could go online and kind of see the people that, kind of follow their career paths and kind of
Sure.
understand what, and pick a mentor and kind of, hopefully everyone is open to mentoring. And
Sure.
I think one of the things I look back at that I'm really proud of is just where all the people that I've worked with or hired have gone. We've got
Yeah.
people that are VP of engineering at large medical companies. I got a co-op who's a president of a Fortune 10 medical device company.
Yep.
So, I can't guarantee that to all my co-ops that they'll end up being the president of a large medical device company. But I pride myself in picking those people, and then hopefully I was able to give them some engineering guidance at that point in their career where they end up being successful. And
Yeah, I think of the people at Radius, I might be the underperformer. I'm still just an
I think I
engineer.
am the underperformer, but no, that's true. Yeah,
There's a bunch of
There's-
VPs and whatnot amongst
yeah,
those folks we
yeah.
work
I
with.
think that just speaks to the high level, the quality of the people that
Yep.
those A players that you look to hire to work
Yep.
with, and those are all fun and interesting people to work with, and hard driving, and and expect that high level. And again, A players want to work with A players.
Right.
They want to
Right.
work with that level of people. So
Sounds good. Tim, this has been fun. I
yeah, it's been
appreciate your
fun catching
time.
up again. Yeah, and we
Are
should get together on
you
a social level at some point too.
are you working or half working or vacation out there?
A little both,
Little both. All
little
right. That's
both.
kind of figured.
But mostly taking care of kids, babysitting. So
Yeah.
that's not. I don't know if
Good.
you want to. That's kind of a vacation.
I
That's,
am. I'm a few years from that, but I'm looking forward to having a little baby running around that's got a little bit of my blood in them, or her,
Mm.
for that matter.
Yeah.
So, all right. Very good, Tim. It's been fun. We will talk
Great.
to you soon.
Thanks, Bert. Take
Bye.
care.
That wraps up today's episode of the Beers with Engineers podcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like, subscribe, give a rating, and most importantly, tell your friends, whether they are an engineer or not. I'm happy to have them listen. Any comments and suggestions are welcomed and encouraged. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or know somebody that you think might be a good guest on the podcast, please let us know that too. Until next time, this is Bert saying goodbye.